the Golden Stallion, the Man of Tomorrow, Sabzu, the Rated R radio star, here, but not alone. But it is that time on Patreon where I get to talk about, and again, it's not just me this time, we get to talk about Star Trek. It's your monthly Star Trek update, and this is so exciting because I've been planning this for a while, in my, I don't know, I got to get some kind of mad scientist set up, and I can just stand over it and kind of twiddle my fingers and everything. But I am being joined not only by the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, the woman of tomorrow.
Woo!
Woo!
Hi.
But I'm also being joined by Ellen Ball.
Hello. I'm so glad to be back.
Yeah, this is going to be great. And we're going to be talking Star Trek specifically this week for the Star Trek update because Discovery's over and there's not a whole lot going on in the comic books and everything. We're actually going to be doing a best of episodes for Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And we're going to talk about the series in general as well. And I don't know, I feel like the luckiest guy on earth because I get to do this with two amazing women, talking about Star Trek. How can you go wrong with that, right?
And
right.
we all love it.
Yeah, I know. Like, this is the great thing is that we're all just crazy fans, which is awesome. So anyway, Deep Space Nine, I'm curious where exactly everybody, kind of fits this in as far as maybe their favorite series or where they would rank it. But this is a show started back in 92, went from 92 to 99, 7 seasons. It ran concurrently with The Next Generation. In fact, there were a couple of seasons, or one season 6 episode, it was 2-parter, where Bashir was even on The Next Generation. So, I mean, these shows were, and of course, the first episode, The Emissary of Deep Space Nine, had the Enterprise D in it.
It had a cameo by
Picard himself.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, talking to Sisko.
Patrick Stewart.
So that, these shows were running at the same time, which that was kind of unique in and of itself when it was doing this, which made it very exciting and it allowed people to know, hey, this is Star Trek, because I think that kind of needed to happen because the show is so different from any other Star Trek.
Don't forget Worf coming on.
Right. We will eventually we would have Worf come on, and definitely we're going to be talking about that because it was a pretty seminal moment for the series. But this is a show that, has a very different look. The uniforms changed. Everything changed with this. It was really, it's really something special to come out. And I think a lot of people were worried. Even like LeVar Burton, of course, who played Geordi LaForge, he said years later, they should have never made any other Star Trek shows besides The Next Generation. Which is ironic because I think he even directed episodes of Deep Space Nine. So like, what the hell is he talking about? Obviously he made a pretty good paycheck off of this himself. But I think a lot of people were worried. How does another Star Trek show do? Can lightning strike twice? And I think it's safe to say Deep Space Nine wasn't as popular as The Next Generation, and it's never really reached the kind of, like, everybody knows who Captain Picard is. Not everybody knows who Captain or Commander Sisko, depending on which part of the series, is. Not as popular. But I don't know. I love Deep Space Nine. Stephanie, what do you say about Deep Space Nine? Where would you rank it maybe in your Star Trek pantheon?
Oh, God. You had to ask me first. We were talking about this last time, and I think I didn't say that Deep Space Nine was my favorite Star Trek, but we were looking over the plot summaries of the episodes to prepare for this show.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, we got to rewatch this. This was like, this was my favorite. So
you're putting this in number one?
I would say it's a 3-way tie for number one between Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager.
Interesting.
I liked all of those.
Interesting choice.
I don't know if I could pick a favorite out of those three. They were all so good.
I want to hear, we're going to give like a best of, like, we're going to do some honorable mentions of episodes, but each of us is going to have a top 3 that we're going to discuss here. So if you've never watched Deep Space Nine, people will know, well, here's where the greatness lies, in the top 3. Usually I like to do a top 8, but I don't think it'd be hard to get a top 8, but for the interest of time, because this isn't going to be terribly long, I think a top 3 is a good thing. So I want to hear why you feel that way, Stephanie, but Ellen, I'll ask you, like, where would you rank this as far as in your pantheon of Star Trek? Is this like your top show, like Stephanie said, or is it more equal maybe to Next Generation? What do you think?
Well, like Stephanie, last time we did this, I think I said Next Generation was my favorite as well, but this series was the biggest contender for that spot against the Next Generation. And I love them both a lot. It's just that DS9 had a totally opposite dynamic to the Next Generation, whereas instead of traveling and going where no man has gone before. Instead, they're just in a space station. But it's kind of like a seaport or something like that, where there's all of these travelers coming in and out, and you get to see all these really diverse characters because of that. So I love it almost as much as the Next Generation, but like for different reasons entirely. So it's, I mean, I don't want to like compare it because they're on very different scales.
Yeah, it's kind of an antithesis show, just in the very basis of like, this is on a space station, so it's a port of call. Everybody has to go to that. That's where with the in the Next Generation with the Enterprise D, the Enterprise had to go to everybody. I mean, like it's almost an antithesis show. And so, yeah, it could be tough to like even compare them in that sense. So I can really understand that perspective. I mean, Stephanie, like what puts this so high on your list?
The thing that puts it so far up on my list was the themes that they explored. And there were so many amazing themes in Deep Space Nine that it's hard to just name them all off. But one of my favorites was the dynamic between the Bajorans and the Cardassians.
Sure.
That shows what any war or occupation is like, and the effects that last through generations from that trauma that affect everybody on both sides, and like war crimes and how those are dealt with.
Yeah, I mean, that was such a very broadly but well done and well implemented conflict between the Bajorans and and the Cardassians. I mean, it's very easy to point at it at being, especially since it was in 92, oh, well, that's representative of the Russians and the Afghanis, or that's but you could pick almost any conflict, and it really kind of fits and shows the allegory and the genuine problems that keep recurring when you have occupations and conflicts and war. So certainly, yeah, I think this is a dark show. I mean, the first season I think is very bright. And I want to talk more about the first season later, but you're right. This is a very dark show, and it covers a lot of very deep themes, especially stuff that honestly at the time I think was pretty risque. I think even covering that, that was dangerous to talk about. I mean, not Star Trek, the original series talked about conflicts, talked about the Cold War a lot.
Yeah.
Whether people realized it or not. But that's pretty risky to be talking about it at a time where, over a subject where real lives were on the line in the world.
I think you can get away with so much more when it's like, oh, those are aliens. They're not representing groups of humans.
That's half the reason Gene Roddenberry made Star Trek.
Exactly.
So that he could do that. Yeah.
Because you can get away with so much more. Other themes that I liked were just how much the Ferengis were kind of like ANCAP, I guess.
Anarcho-capitalists, for those that don't know.
Yeah. And all the criticisms of anarcho-capitalism and libertarianism. And they were just like almost, it's so funny how alike they are culturally.
The unrestrained love of profit. Yeah, sure.
They were really funny. I mean, I thought that there was a lot of, even though it was a dark show, there was a lot of humor in the show, largely due to the Ferengis being in there.
Yeah,
prominently.
Made for a very comedic element.
A lot of the Cardassian characters were just like fascinating. Like they had secrets upon secrets and drama upon drama, and they're spies and they're a double agent, and they're, they just kept you guessing so much.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, Ellen, were there any major themes in the show that really stuck out for you that you thought were really powerful? Or
yeah, well, I certainly love the ones that Stephanie just listed. But there was one other one that I really liked, and that was Odo. He was kind of an enigma in the show because there's, for the first few seasons anyway, you don't know what he is or who he is or where he came from, and he doesn't even know that. And he's kind of like,
he struggles with it a lot.
Yeah, he's very like lonely and embittered, and then he makes this discovery of where he comes from and whose people are, and is like mysteriously drawn to them and to the home planet. And I mean, it's just amazing to see his transformation over time, and for him to like learn to explore his shape-shifting capabilities. I thought that was a really fun element to the show, and also, it was just such a personal endeavor for him because he was like striking it out on his own in a way. And some other things that I loved about the show was that the characters often were not very clear cut. Like you couldn't tell who was good and who was bad. Like sometimes,
or the roles would even shift.
Yeah, sometimes like the Federation officers would end up being the bad guys, and the Cardassians or the Ferengi would end up doing something that was like really heartwarming. So you never really know. Like even Captain Sisko himself was at times kind of evil.
Yeah, no, genuinely. I don't think that's unfair to say. I mean, and it even starts off with him, we're so used to, especially with the Next Generation, we're so used to Starfleet officers being confident. Yes, I'll do my job, sir. I'm on it. And when Sisko first gets assigned to Terok Nor, or what ends up becoming Deep Space Nine,
he's reluctant.
He's very reluctant. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to leave. I think he's working at Utopia Planitia Yards in Mars. He's with us. He has a son. He's a single father because his wife died during the Battle of World 359. And there's already this instant conflict. And he has to face like his genuine enemy, that being Picard, who was Locutus at the Battle of World 359 with the Borg. And he has to face them. And he, he doesn't like this at all. And Picard even says, I'll find somebody to replace you. Picard doesn't take any shit. And, but it's amazing to even see somebody really question, what's going on, like their duty and everything. Like even that was right from the first episode. That was right in Emissary. That was right in the first episode. And then that was kind of shocking. Yeah.
I was actually just about to say that, to bring up the character of Sisko, and just, he had such a difficult, so many difficult situations that he found himself in the middle of, kind of through no fault of his own. It was like he was just constantly given these tests, and it's like the universe throws something at him and they're like, well, you figure this out,
Yeah.
And he has to make difficult decisions that aren't easy, and it's not clear what the right choice is. Whereas a lot of the Starfleet captains, it's like they would often end up in these situations where it would be a clear-cut thing, like this is the right thing to do, this is the heroic thing to do, and they would do it and everybody would love them. But Sisko got just so many challenges, like just first being assigned to the space station that he didn't really want to go to. Also, like, raising this kid on his own, right? Because his wife dies. Like, he didn't ask for that. He's doing the best he can as a single dad, but it's not always easy. Yeah. Right. And, and then a lot of the situations that come up as a result of just being thrown in the middle of this conflict between Bajorans and Cardassians, and this former Cardassian space station that's been like commandeered, And
not to mention, he's the emissary too. Like, he didn't know about that.
That was the other thing. He didn't ask to be the emissary. Yeah, he just kind of gets thrust into that situation too.
He's pretty much Jesus Christ for the Bajorans. I mean, like that's effectively what he finds out, and he has no.
He doesn't accept it at first.
Yeah, at first, and for quite a few years, he doesn't really accept it
until at the end. He's considering leaving Starfleet and just being the emissary.
Yeah,
didn't he live on Earth for a few months and just kind of worked at his father's restaurant?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. The Creole restaurant or something. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and the show really sets that up, like, especially with the character of Bashir, who might have been one of my favorites throughout it. He comes on and like, he's the only person that actually wants to be there. He's the Starfleet officer. He's excited about this. He said, he's like salutatorian out of his class in Starfleet Medical. And he said, or at Starfleet Academy for Starfleet Medical. And he says, I want to be on the frontier. He's like, this is where the rules don't apply. And I have to do real medicine and new medicine and all this stuff. And so the show does set you up saying, guess what? The rules don't apply here. Like the shit's going to change. The Prime Directive could be very, very ugly. In fact, there's very little application of the Prime Directive because it's not like they're always going to other worlds, not until later seasons when they get the Defiant, which we'll talk about that. Ellen, did you have?
And they don't know what's in the Gamma Quadrant either.
Right. And the wormhole is right there. And
which they didn't know initially was there. And then suddenly they find it and oh shit. Yeah.
Yeah. And now all hell breaks loose. People are, there's all sorts of ships and new species coming in and out. It adds a whole new element of you don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a show that would end up, and we'll certainly explore this as we talk about our each of us talks about our top 3 episodes. This is a show that explored a lot of stuff that Star Trek never would, and that honestly, I think if Gene Roddenberry was kind of alive when this was still getting worked on, but for all intents and purposes, Gene was gone when the show came out. And I think Gene would have, in fact, I know Gene said no to this, but they did it anyway. And there's a lot of things that get explored in this that Gene Roddenberry would have told, if he was alive and well, he would have said, fuck no, you're not going to talk about that on this show. And I don't want to piss on Gene's memory or anything, but I'm glad they ignored him. I'm glad they went forward and that they did this. But this show did a great job still, as different as it was based on everything, you two are describing. And it's true. It still was able to build on beautifully onto what the Next Generation put in place and even the original series. In fact, some of my favorite moments include Next Generation recurring characters. You're talking about Odo, Ellen. And one of my favorite episodes is where Odo gets stuck in an elevator with Loxana Troy. In fact, I think that might be one of the honorable mention episodes you had, which is civil defense. They get,
and she has the hots for him.
She likes him, and she's this really outgoing character and everything. And Odo's just this stoic, like, leave me alone, and all.
He's very like stuck to the rules kind of person.
Exactly right. And, he has this very well-defined sense of justice for himself and everything and how life goes and that he's very private. And, of course, you find out that Odo, every 24 hours, I think it is, or something like that, he has to go into his gelatinous state, his liquid state, and he can't stay as his...
he sleeps in a bucket.
Yeah, he sleeps in a bucket, exactly. But there's a point where he's starting to kind of almost decompose inside of this elevator because he doesn't want to... It's so vulnerable for him, for anybody to see him in that state, because he is vulnerable in that state when he's in his liquid state. And it's just a beautiful moment where Loxana Troyes just says, trust me. And she just holds out her dress and he just turns into a puddle in her dress, and she just holds him there. And it is, and then they have this awesome relationship after that, even though it never really gets romantic. There's just this trust that gets built, on being able to see somebody at their most vulnerable, including someone that would seem to be, so powerful like Odo, or, when you find out about what his race is, spoiler alerts, folks, the founders, that they're like gods. And this god has to be vulnerable. I mean, like but it wouldn't have made sense if you didn't have that 7 years of foundation of what a character like Loxana Troy was, in the next generation. And that's a really powerful thing. Another one of my favorite ones is when Q makes one appearance in the show, which credit to them, because I think Voyager used Q like a crutch to try and get next generation viewers to come back, as to where I think Deep Space Nine kind of garnered its own crowd, garnered its own, viewers. But the one episode, it was in the first season, the episode's called Q-less, where, he's like goading Cisco and he tells Cisco, he's I don't know, just trying to get him to react or something. And finally Cisco punches Q right in the face. And it's amazing that the punch lands, which is pretty wild. In fact, I think even has implications to the idea of him being the emissary. But just Q falls over and goes, because he's so shocked, and just says, Picard would have never hit me. And Cisco just comes right in and says, I'm not Picard. And which is awesome, because that sets the stage more in the first season. This isn't the Next Generation, folks. You're getting a very different show. So a lot of these little things that you get that built off of the Next Generation, but also made it very clear, this is not your granddaddy's Star Trek. Right?
Yeah. One of the things that I was thinking of when you were saying, Brian, that Gene Roddenberry would have been rolling over in his grave, was that there was so much commerce depicted and so much like...
Gene didn't like money.
Exactly. Yeah. But there was this whole storyline with the bar that Quark runs in this station, where he overhears a lot of conversations and a lot happens there. And then there's these holo suites that are meant for entertainment, not for just like battle training or things like that.
Right.
They're meant for pure entertainment. There's a lot of like sex workers there too.
I don't think he would have minded that. Like, I think if Gene heard of like one of the popular holo novels or like holosuite programs you find out about is called Vulcan Love Slave, which I think is fantastic. And well, anyway, I don't think Gene would have minded that, so
there's also like an exploration, a little bit of like VR and like consent and stuff like that, because I remember there's this one episode where like somebody, I forget who it is, somebody is sneakily trying to take holo images of Kira so they can recreate a holodeck program where she's their sex fantasy fulfiller or whatever.
We might end up save that thought, because in our Sovereign Tech Prime episode, which newsflash or behind the scenes, folks, this is being recorded before we record Sovereign Tech Prime, and we might discuss that very subject, because I think that's first off, it's ridiculous that there's no way they don't already have some kind of 3D map of Kira. I mean, there's cameras fucking everywhere. Come on. You just look in Odo's office. He's constantly looking at everything going on. But that is interesting that they went into that with VR.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, but anyway, not to get sidetracked on the commerce, like there was more commerce in this show and there was more money going on than any other Star Trek. Yeah. And I thought that was interesting. Like it was almost like a mall. There was almost like a mall in the ship.
Yeah, the promenade. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really was. Ellen, I'm going to throw you a tough question here.
Okay.
Like, I mean, how do you feel about that? How do you, in Star Trek in general, because, you've seen the bulk of this and, of all the shows. And, like, how do you feel about that no money aspect? Like, I mean, did you just think about that and just go, wow, that's ridiculous? Or what do you think?
Oh, no, I don't think it's ridiculous. I think it's kind of an idealized concept that Well, the thing is, one of the themes that they explore in DS9, even Quark, I think in one of the episodes, he says something about it, like, these Starfleet officers, they seem like heroes to you now, but take away their creature comforts and they're going to turn into vicious, nasty creatures, just like everyone else. And I think that's true for pretty much all living things, especially people. We can be smart and intelligent and wonderful and amazing, but when we aren't taken care of, when we don't have our basic needs met, the self-preservation kicks in, and you do what it takes to survive.
Sure.
So I think that there's nothing wrong with that necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And that out of that need, I think, came the idea of money, the exchange of goods and services, and having limited resources and putting a value on those. But I think it's sort of an ideal because in the future, there's just going to be such a wealth of goods, or at least in Star Trek, they did a really good job of representing this, like with the replicators.
Right.
They could just make whatever they needed whenever.
Yeah, make any food in any moment, and sure.
Right, exactly. So I don't think it's a ridiculous idea. I don't know that it's going to happen anytime soon for us here in the real world.
Right.
But in Star Trek, it was an awesome theme to throw in there. Like, what if we didn't have to worry about when our next meal is going to come? Like, what if we had all of the goods and services that we needed?
Sure.
Like, if we didn't have to worry about money, what could we achieve?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's interesting because that really does get chipped away at, that whole idea, often in Deep Space Nine. I mean, like, the replicators will fail. Mm-hmm. And then what do people do? They have to eat their version of MREs or rations or something. I remember even there's an episode where there's an argument between Nog, which is Quark's brother's son, mm-hmm. between Nog and Jake, which is Captain Sisko's son. And like, Nog is trying to say, well, but what do you do when you have to pay for this? What do you have to do when you need to get this? And Jake just gets frustrated at one point. It's like, well, we just don't need money. Like, he's just like, we just don't. He doesn't even understand the economics of it, which I think maybe shines a light on it, saying, wait a minute, how do we even get here? And even, the people of the Federation don't really know how they got there exactly, which I thought was kind of interesting. I mean, Stephanie, do you have any thoughts on that? Or
wasn't there something with Keiko O'Brien where she's like a school teacher on the
mm-hmm.
ship, and she's not really thrilled to be there either, by the way. Like, Miles O'Brien, her husband.
Oh yeah, and they have a daughter.
Yep. He gets assigned to Deep Space Nine, and she's kind of along for the ride. She's like, well, I guess I'll teach the kids in school, but she's teaching him about certain things. And I think one of them is money or like taxation or something like that. And, Nog is like asking all these questions, and he gets like kicked out of the class or something because he's asking what he's not supposed to,
Sure. Yeah. No, that happens. Yeah, I think we kind of hit on, like, the religious themes are a major part of this.
Yeah, the religious, like, power struggles within the Bajorans are so fascinating. They have, like, more socially conservative kind of religious figures and more progressive ones. And it's very interesting because they're clashing and they're struggling for power. They're trying to assume the leadership positions, become Kai or whatever.
And still maintain their piety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah, I want to get more of your take on this.
They have like controlled access to these orbs where you can ask questions to the prophets and things like that.
Right. Yeah, so I want to ask you more on this, Ellen, but I mean, I just want to say, like, this is the one part of it that, when even at the time, I guess I would have been religious. Like, I think unconsciously, I really enjoyed The Next Generation and even the original series for steering clear of religion and just pretending it doesn't even exist, and for it to get introduced in Deep Space Nine, it might be the reason, because I didn't answer this question for myself. Where do I rank it? I don't put it at number one, but And actually, I think it's kind of chic now, like to call it, or it's like in vogue to call it number one for some reason, for a lot of people. And that's fine. I mean, because it is so different. And I mean, I can understand that. And I don't have any gripes with it. I mean, the arguments are being made right now as to why. But like and to this day, when we watch it again, like I get frustrated with Kai Wynn, and with all the
Kai Wen is the most annoying. Yeah,
she's the most hated character for sure.
Yeah,
she's a great villain though.
Worse than Gul Dukat.
Yeah.
I actually kind of like Dukat in a way, but I mean,
I liked him until he started trying to fuck Kira. Maybe not liked him, but I could stand him.
But when they touch on it and it's so frustrating because they do a beautiful job of just showing how fucking illogical it is, and logic is such a major part of Star Trek, whether Spock's there or not, and man, I recognize that because they're getting that rise out of me, it's that good, but at the same time, I don't want it. I'd be just as happy to not see that and not be a part of it.
But the thing was, the religiosity of the Bajorans was one of the things that was cited as a reason that they're not ready to join the Federation, because they're so dependent on religious leaders, and their religion is so wrapped up with their way of life that it may conflict with the principles of Starfleet or something, or the Federation.
Right. Their loyalty to their religion is greater than to the Federation.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, Ellen, what did you think about the religious aspects of Deep Space Nine?
Oh, well, I thought it was fascinating.
Okay.
So, like you said, the other series didn't exactly touch on religion at all. They just acted like it didn't exist. But I mean, that's not the world that we live in. It does exist. And, I'm glad that they took it on because, I mean, if you're going to take on these major issues, why not do it through sci-fi? But I loved the whole idea because, I mean, it's something that we have to deal with. There's a whole Vatican City. It's its own country, and people religiously flock there to see the Pope and everything. So, there are parallels in our life, and I thought it was cool that they explored it in the show. I also was fascinated that Sisko was he was the emissary. He didn't even know it the entire time, and you get to actually meet the prophets and get to know them and get. There was an episode where Sisko went into the wormhole and he spent some time with the prophets in there.
Yeah.
They were able to communicate with him, but only through his memories, and their sense of time wasn't linear. It was kind of eternal or something like that. It was a very interesting thing that they included in there. I don't know. I kind of was upset at the end when Sisko accepted that he was the emissary, but it was okay when he was talking about the prophets as if they were aliens, advanced aliens. But when it turned into more of a spiritual, mystical thing, that was where it got weird for me.
Yeah. Okay. So quick on this. Yeah, exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth. Is that it was cool at first when they're just aliens, right? These orbs, they're just aliens. It's Tears of the Prophets and all that stuff, and in fact, the moment you were describing is there's a few moments I think where it happens, but I think the one in particular was in the first episode in The Emissary. And he gives this great speech where he says, I'm not here to conquer you with ideas. I'm not here to do any of this. We're just, Starfleet's mission. We're just here to coexist and learn. And that's the way I like to live. I mean, it's a great moment for Sisko. But when they started making it serious, I was like, oh, come on, guys. It's nice when you were just trying to give it almost like an ancient alien theory kind of spin, or an ancient astronaut theory kind of spin. But then to suddenly make it, oh, no, he's accepting this, I didn't feel it.
Well, I have a different perspective on that. I actually liked it because it shows a plausible idea for where the origins of some religions could have come from. And it shows how there can just be different interpretations of the facts that would lead you to different conclusions, right? So
but then he buys into it. I hear you. I agree. I like that. But then Sisko eventually buys into it.
Right. Well, he buys into it, but you don't have to. You don't have to come along with it. It's just showing kind of both sides, and how even somebody who wasn't born into that culture or whatever could accept a narrative that it has a deeper spiritual meaning.
Yeah. I mean, did you have something, Ellen?
Yeah, I was just going to say that's true. He wasn't born in that Bajoran society, but throughout the entire series, you see Kira is very faithful to this religion, and she prays to the prophets, and That was always something that kind of irked me. Seeing that was that the prophets have a plan, and there's like this worshiping of the prophets. I was just amazed that even with all of the technology that they have in the future and like all of the things that they see and overcome, that she's still kind of like putting her fate in their hands.
Yeah,
in
and
a sense.
I'm fairly certain there's episodes, or there's at least one episode where she even says, throughout the series, she gets an abundance of evidence that they're just aliens. They're not really prophets.
Yeah, they don't have the powers that they're attributing to them.
Right, they're not gods anyway, And I mean, maybe because of the way that they exist, they can kind of see the future, kind of like. Well, I'm not going to go down that road, but anyway, she'll come right out and say that, yeah, I know I saw them do this, and I know that they're this, but I still need my faith. Like, she's more or less saying, like, I'm going to ignore all the evidence, and I'm just, going to take all this on faith. And yeah, that is disappointing. Like, that's kind of a direction I didn't want to see them go. I was going to say, the one thing they're lucky about is that, and I don't mean to take this in this direction necessarily, but I'll just say it quick. It's a good thing that Cisco honestly was black. Because if we needed one more white savior for some civil, the white guy comes to save the indigenous people, that would have been insulting. I think if that happened. So I don't know how far ahead they planned that. There is.
I really liked that, and there were actually several episodes where they kind of made statements about discrimination or like civil rights, I guess. Like there's a few where he goes back into the past and he's discriminated against because he's black and things like that.
Sure.
And they'll say stuff like, oh, well, in the future we don't have that anymore or something, or we've gotten past that. But like they definitely used it to make a lot of statements. And I agree. I think that a lot of minorities are like humans now we're talking about. A lot of minorities are used to just having a life almost like Cisco, where they get thrown a lot of like difficult challenges. Life doesn't always go smoothly for them because of getting discriminated against and how they're judged and treated by society. And so I think he was really relatable because you could see like, oh yeah, I've been in sort of tests like that where it seems like there's no right answer, and you have to just kind of keep your head up and try to like maintain your dignity even when you're being pelted with rocks or something, and like it seems like there's no right answer and everybody's going to hate you no matter what you decide.
Yeah I can hear that. Okay, so why don't we do let's maybe list off favorite character, if we can pick up, if you think you can.
I wasn't prepared for this.
Yeah, I just thought about it, and then we can do the top three. I could start off with favorite character,
okay.
and then while you two think about it, and then we'll get into our top threes. And I'm not sure who's going to start with the top threes, but anyway, so my personal favorite character. Probably one of the minor characters, and I'm not going to say Morn, even though that'd be an easy pick. I love Morn. Guy's just there. But,
never says a word.
He's just there. He's a great listener, And, I got to give it to, I just always enjoyed Garrick, and maybe it's just
that was going to be mine. All right, so we all love Garrick.
We're three aliens here.
So we have to say why we like Garrick.
Yeah. So I'll start off. I mean. First off, I always thought that, you find out kind of that he's not, but initially, I thought he was gay, and I actually thought that was really cool. But that's not the most important thing about him. The thing with him is the mystery is you don't know what this guy's been through. And out of nowhere, he just seems to have the most remarkable abilities. And, I love that, where it seems like this just perfectly ordinary person, other than the fact that he's a Cardassian still on the station, just comes out of nowhere and can do anything. It's really, really impressive. And also, you never really know where he's coming from. I think he has appealed to my lifelong sense of nihilism, in that, right and wrong is kind of what fits in the day. Like morality doesn't actually exist. This kind of thing, but then when there's someone he really cares about, Like that's really where his morality stands. And it's I don't know, there's so much with that character to talk about because it is the enigma. And I think people are naturally appealed to people with enigmas or, that seem somewhat mysterious or have some interesting past that you don't know everything about. And even I can fall prey to that, certainly as a younger person as well. Because out of nowhere, he's like commanding an Obsidian Order fleet with the Romulans. It's like, whoa, how the hell did this guy pull that off? And who's an Abrantane and what the hell is all this? I mean, it's really, so yeah, I kind of have to give it to Garrick, and that's my take on it. Stephanie, if you want to go, then Ellen will. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of trying to pick between Garrick and Sisko.
Sure.
But so I said some of the reasons that I like Sisko's character because he's like very human, and he has to constantly make all these hard choices, and you get a lot of growth when you're faced with hard choices like that constantly. And he's sort of always reluctantly accepting the task of leadership or rising to the occasion. But he's like, oh, shit, well, I didn't ask for this. I just got to do the best with what I have, So I like Sisko for those reasons. He's very human, and I really like that. Garrick, again, being an INTJ, I like the mystery. He's very quiet. He keeps his cards close to his chest. It keeps you guessing. There's one episode where Garrick gets sick, and he's like, Bashir is like, I could help you and save you, but you have to talk to me and tell me what's wrong with you.
Right.
And he's like, no, like he would almost rather die than like tell Bashir whatever personal secrets this illness is covering up.
Yeah, the reality of his existence and everything, sure.
Right. And so then finally he squeals at the end, I think, or something happens where he gets better.
He tells a few different stories. But
he's telling lies until the fucking end, he just keeps you guessing constantly. And it's really fun to be kept guessing in that way. Like, what is his actual deal? I also thought Garrick might have been gay for a while. And that might have been one of the many skeletons in his closet that he was sort of hiding. And I could imagine in Cardassian culture that it might not be cool to be gay.
Yeah, I mean, and it was fine when you kind of get the hint that he really wasn't, because he has a very interesting relationship with Gul Dukat's daughter, and who, is younger, but a woman, no doubt, and she's fighting.
And she's one of those mixed race, half Cardassian, half Bajoran. Yes. So she's felt, like an outcast her whole life.
Yeah, which he could relate with, is being that outcast, and when you find someone else that understands that level of being an alien in society, I think I liked that exploration. It was good enough to say, okay, well, he's not, because Deep Space Nine didn't shy away from very unconventional relationships and things like that.
Yeah, it was very progressive,
which was great.
Way,
yeah, and so I didn't mind when they brought it to that, because I was like, okay, no, this makes sense. This is beautiful. What's going on?
I think that is the biggest reason I liked Garrick, is because like I could relate to being an outsider. Yeah, like he was definitely an outcast. And there was one point where he says, we don't know if it's really true, but he appears to have been excommunicated from Cardassia from living there. And that's why he has to live on the space station. And he says it was because he didn't pay his taxes. I was like, yes.
Yeah. But, and just quick again, like I really did love, again, that his morality was really based around the people that he cared about. And like he would come right out and just say, hey, if there's if Dukat's daughter or something was in trouble, he would literally blow up the entire station if it meant him rescuing her or whatever. And I think that's so powerful. Ellen, Garrick, tell me about it.
Yeah. So Garrick, of course, is a man of mystery. And he's completely fascinating because of that. I remember one of my favorite scenes that I guess best exemplifies this is Bashir was telling him the story about the boy who cried wolf.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, what's the point of this story? And Bashir's like, well, if you lie all the time, no one's going to believe you when you tell the truth.
Never tell the same lie twice.
Right, exactly.
I remember that. Yeah.
That was Garrick's take on the story.
Yeah.
And that perfectly summed up his character to me. That was just, man, he always keeps you guessing, but at the same time, you can sense he just has a very strong and powerful character. But since you both have talked about Garrick, I guess I want to talk about another character of mine that was really, besides Odo, which I already mentioned, I really liked Jadzia Dax. She was one of my favorite characters. because not only was she like clever and witty and very playful with the way that she would like play jokes on some of the other characters, but she also she wasn't just Jadzia Dax, she was Dax, and Dax was the symbiotic
the symbiote
alien thing that lived inside of her body that had already lived like multiple other lives.
Yeah.
So this one young woman has the experience of like 10 lifetimes. And
and it was fun, like how Cisco would always call her old man, because Cisco knew her previous the previous host of the symbiote, that being Curzon Dax. And continue.
Right.
I'm a fan as well.
She was just such a powerful character because of that. Like we were talking about earlier, there's one episode where she had this pact with a few other Klingons, and they had to avenge this one guy's death. So they went, and she was a total badass. Like, she knows how to use a batleth.
Yeah.
Really great in combat. Like, very intelligent. She's just got all of the really strong character traits that made her outstanding, and not just another pretty face on screen.
Right. Yeah.
I loved the gender bending that went on there, because it's like, obviously, if you've lived 10 lifetimes in 10 different bodies, you've had hosts that are treated differently based on their appearance and their gender and stuff.
Yeah.
And you might have experienced like living in a woman's body and giving birth, but also in a man's body and being a father or whatever, other things, and sex from different perspectives and things like that, and being treated differently. And it's just like, it was almost like kind of a karmic, I think, like a twist of fate, that Dax was Curzon, who was like, by all accounts, we never really saw the character, but by all accounts, Curzon was kind of like a misogynist. He was like kind of a body, like hung out with the guys.
A womanizer.
Kind of a womanizer, yeah. Would have probably smacked Jadzia's body on the ass if he saw her, right?
Yeah, sure.
But then Dax comes back as this hot young woman and gets to experience all this sexual harassment and people like giving her unwanted attention. And it's like, oh, the tables isn't that interesting, you know?
Well, it's great because she would also get in their face about it. And like, she would multiple times say something along the lines of, I've been a man 8 times.
Yeah.
Don't tell me how this works.
Right.
And I think that was really cool. Yeah. That's a very unique character when you really break it down. I thought, Ezri was cool too in the 7th season, because spoiler alerts, Jadzia dies. But her replacement, Ezri, which Nicole DeBauer, who I've met, she's just a wonderful woman. I think that was kind of cool to like, how do you interact with all these people who know you as somebody else, and they're seeing something else, and like her interactions with Worf and all this stuff. Just a really cool, there's a lot more to explore with that character, but we don't have to spend the time on that. But do you have anything else on Jadzia you wanted to share, Ellen?
Just that I really love the explorations that they did with her character. Because there was so much possible with somebody who's lived that long and made that many connections. Like, Jadzia was always running into people who knew Dax in a former life. So that was really fun. And yeah, I did like the gender bending as well, which I think that's coming up in one of our favorite episodes.
Yeah, I think this will be in the top 3. So why don't we break into it?
Well, one more thing about Dax.
Please.
Maybe this has got to go on the honorable mentions, but there was this one episode where she channels all of her past hosts, and she goes through the 10 different or however many different ones.
Yes.
And gives a little summary of their life. And I thought that was really, really cool to hear.
Yeah, that was interesting. In fact, like with Odo takes on Curzon's personality, and there's a big conflict because Curzon and Odo want to stay together because Curzon makes Odo feel very normal. Because Curzon is just this guy who can get along with everybody.
Yeah, they end up becoming the same being in a way.
Yeah, very weird way.
No longer Odo or Curzon, but a mixture of both.
Right. Yeah, it is. Really interesting exploration of a character that I can't even really think of another character in science fiction that quite plays off like her, which kudos to them for that. But okay, why don't we get into the top 3? I think maybe Stephanie will start with you, but what I actually want to start with, let's start with you. There's an episode that the two of you had that was the same. And we'll save that for the last one that you'll do, Stephanie. And
Okay.
then that'll bleed into to Ellen's points.
Okay. So maybe first the honorable mentions.
Well, we'll do those last.
Okay.
So, but let's do your first one. And in fact, first one's going to be Second Skin from season 3, which this is the episode where Kira finds out or is told that she's actually a Cardassian agent. She's been that her whole life. She is the daughter of a very high ranking official in the Obsidian Order,
Which is like
or
the
in
Cardassian
Empire
CIA.
anyway, or Cardassian Union, whatever. Go for it.
So, okay, we know Kira throughout the whole series as a very strongly identified Bajoran person. She's like very religious. She's spent her whole life being a freedom fighter. She has a lot of ideas about activism and how to best accomplish it, and, sort of working to build to build moderate change. Like, she's kind of a centrist, trying to work with all sides, but also, work with the radicals in Bajor.
Yeah, she identifies she's Bajoran and she's the resistance from
Yeah.
during the occupation, and like that's the core of her being.
Yeah.
Sure. And her faith.
Yeah. So she gets kidnapped and she wakes up and she looks in the mirror and she's Cardassian. Suddenly, she's got the ridges, she's got different hair, she's got her face is completely different.
Yeah.
She wakes up, she's like, oh, no, what the fuck did you do to me? And then this nice old Cardassian man comes out and says, oh, my daughter, I've missed you so much.
Right.
You're not going to believe me, but you are actually Cardassian. You always have been. You were surgically altered to look like a Bajoran and planted on Bajor as a spy to spy on the resistance, basically. And you don't know any of this because it would have been too dangerous for you to know it. So we had to erase your memories or something like that and implant them.
Yeah, and I think there might have been that they thought she was even dead or something.
Right.
And then they found out the opposite.
Yeah.
The whole thing ends up being a plot.
Yeah.
To try and expose her father, who is claiming to be her father or whatever. And so they just use her to kind of make this point.
So it's all bullshit, but they really mess with her head, and
she starts to believe it.
And she starts to believe it.
There's a point where she kind of admits, I was believing it.
Yeah.
And I mean, so what made this episode powerful for you? I mean, it was the first one you mentioned to me when I asked for a top 3.
Yeah.
And I mean, that really sticks out. So what did it?
It really stuck out because that was one of my favorite themes in the show. As I mentioned, what happens when you have a war and conflict and the trauma just goes through generations, and there's all this wrong that's been done, and how do you ever set it right? And, it was just really interesting for her, someone who was so firmly on one side, to get to the point where she would almost start to believe that she had always been on the other side all along. And how does that affect who she is? She has to completely start over with her identity, and she has to completely start over with how she thinks of Cardassians and how she thinks of Bajorans and groups and stuff like that. And it was a very I think it could induce a lot of empathy, I guess, for the other side,
Yeah, I mean, I after you described it that way, and Ellen, if you have comments on any of this, jump right in. The idea that you suddenly find out everything you thought you knew was just wrong.
Yeah.
Was just dead wrong. And everything you identified with wasn't you. Wow.
That's why it was so powerful.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a moment where you found out some kind of information that made you question everything you thought you knew?
Sure. Yeah. I've been there.
Yeah, she did throw up a lot of resistance to that.
Yeah.
She did not want to believe it. I think she got violently angry at certain points. She just didn't want to hear it anymore.
Yeah.
Completely freaked out. And I mean, I would be the same way too. That's such a dramatic shift to make, going from one side to the other.
Yeah. So I can see that, and I can see where a lot of people would relate to that, just to that abstract notion.
Yeah.
That suddenly, no, none of this is real. Or none of
You
this is true.
actually find out that you are this thing that you thought you hated. It's almost like a Nazi, someone who was high up in the Nazi party in World War II, finding out that they were Jewish all along, or something like that, or vice versa.
Yeah, you don't even have to go that far. I mean, I can really and now I almost want to watch the episode again because I remember. I don't mean to take.
I want to watch the whole thing again.
Yeah, I'm just going to say this briefly because I don't want to take this into any kind of dark place or something. But I remember when I finally came to terms with the fact that the U.S. military is a fucking evil organization.
Yeah,
and I was a part of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that fucks with those are some bad nights,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I can really understand. Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah, right on. Do you have more comments on it? Go for it.
I think that's why it stood out, because it's like, what's in a way, like, what's more disturbing than that is like being just put in a situation or waking up one day and questioning everything you thought to be true. Like,
Sure.
what's more crazy making than that, you know?
Sure.
So I think that was why it was so powerful for me, because I could identify with that for sure.
Yeah. Now, the rest of your episodes, everything's season 3, which is interesting. Star Trek does seem to have a history, minus maybe Enterprise, where season 3 is when these shows will often hit their stride, like really, really start picking up like these great stories. And I think what really happens is that you're able to finally identify with the characters because you're so used to them at this point.
Yeah.
Because Kira wouldn't be a character that you'd necessarily relate to, normally. Would you say that? Maybe some ways.
I guess I liked her and I admired her strong sense of like right and wrong, and
Sure.
I like related to her in that way. And that I believe that she was trying to do what she thought was best for her people and everything.
Right.
But yeah, she is kind of a zealot. She is kind of annoying at times, and she's an ideologue.
Yeah.
And I think we all can get annoyed by people like that sometimes. But she had to be in order to make that episode pop so much, because it was such a contrast.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is you could describe all that about her, and so you're able to empathize, and that's why the episode could stick out,
Yeah.
even if it wasn't your favorite character or something. So
That's right,
that's
yeah.
the point. I think that's really wild. Do you want to go on to the next episode?
Sure. Yeah,
So
sure.
next episode for you is Family Business. Which this
Family
one,
Business.
from dark to so much fun.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
with such a point, though. This is also season 3.
Yes.
As
I mentioned, one of my favorite parts of DS9 was the humor that was brought by the Ferengis. And I remember just thinking this episode was so awesome. So what happens in the plot is Quark returns to his homeworld, Ferenginar, which is the Ferengi homeworld. They live in these little like hobbit houses, by the way. And in traditional Ferengi social norms are the women are submissive and subservient to the men. This is represented by the women are not allowed to wear clothes. So it's clothed male, nude female.
I love in the episode because this is one of the first times you see Ferenginar, and like every time he even has to go through a door, he has to pay some kind of toll.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's so ANCAP.
Yeah, it's the ANCAP dream. No, go ahead.
Yeah, it is true. It is really like that. Like everything's a little fee, you know, like everything is set up to encourage like business and commerce, but of course only men are allowed to make profit and to to do business and to participate in commerce.
Right.
And they'll regularly say stuff like whenever women, even women from other species, they call them females, they never call them women. They're like, oh, what is this female doing here?
Yeah, theirs have that tinge of disgust in their voices.
Now, and the idea of them having to wear clothing or not wearing clothing is established in the episode Menage a Trois in the Next Generation, where Loxana and Deanna get captured and they can't believe that they're forced to wear clothing. So like that's not, and I actually might even be before, or no, actually it's the first season of the Next Generation. I could totally see this was Gene's idea, where he's like, because they're saying how evil, they're trying to convince this guy from this interstellar empire why the humans are so evil. He's like, look at what they do. They give their women weapons. They clothe them.
Yeah.
And, like, this is terrible, like, it's like, oh, they give them rights. What the fuck? So this is not like a Deep Space Nine idea. This has been established for a while, but Deep Space Nine's taken and just run with it. Keep going.
Right. And so the whole Ferengi society is organized around business and commerce, and they have these rules of acquisition, they're called, which is like the Bible of like rules on how to run a business and make profit. But of course, that only women are not allowed, or females are not allowed to participate in this because they're considered substandard or subservient. They're only there to be nude and to reproduce.
And pre-chew food.
And pre-chew food, yes.
Yeah.
So Quark gets called back to his homeworld for an emergency, and the emergency is that his mother is really stirring the shit. Quark's mother is wearing clothing.
Yep.
She's going around wearing clothing. She is
Shameful.
making profit. She's making a shit ton of money. She has taken over the family business when his father died or something like that.
Yeah.
And, it turns out that she was really kind of running it all along. And she said at one point she says something like, well, your father never really had the lobes for business, right? It was always me. So she's turning into quite the feminist dream.
Yeah.
And Quark is like, you got to stop this. I can't even believe you're wearing clothes right now. I can't even look at you, But his brother Rom is like, well, what's the big deal? She's our mom. We still love her. It's why can't she make profit? Why should we stop her?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, Rom throughout the entire series is this real foil to wait a minute, maybe the Ferengi are wrong. Mm-hmm. He even kind of Nog ends up joining Starfleet, but he ends up being very close with Starfleet, and he even there's a point where he starts a union and everything, which is the greatest evil that you could possibly commit as a Ferengi. but anyway, so yeah, it's not hard to believe that that Rom is a little more open, a little more progressive to these ideas.
Right.
So continue.
Yeah, and so there's this conflict between Quark and Rom about their mother's activities.
Sure.
And I don't remember how it ends. I just thought it was so awesome that she was doing this stuff. Well, actually, I think it just continues, and Quark agrees to kind of leave her alone or buys off some officials to let her continue doing her business.
Yeah, she kind of compromises, but she keeps a bunch of stuff secret. You find out that she really has plenty of money still that
she's
she made
still
herself.
Stacking those whatever dinero.
Yeah, exactly. So this is obviously, no doubt about it, this is a feminist inspired episode, which I say great,
And it turns into a whole story arc, because later you find out in subsequent episodes, you find out that Quark's mother has taken up with the Grand Nagus
himself.
The Grand Nagus
becomes quite the feminist as well.
Right. And then the Grand Nagus becomes a feminist and starts advocating for women's rights on Ferenginar because of Quark's mother.
Yeah. So what did it for you with this episode? Was it just that
It was the argument from absurdity about feminism. Uh-huh. It's like, okay, most people, I think, especially during the 90s when this was airing on television, had at least passively, if not actually, sexist and misogynistic beliefs about women. They believed in their heart of hearts that women really aren't as good as men in any way, business, whatever. They're really not as strong. They're just the weaker sex. They're basically just there for reproduction. They're always going to be kind of inferior, but we still want to fuck them, so we'll tolerate them, right? So people believe this kind of stuff passively, but even though maybe they wouldn't overtly say it, or very few people would say it, but when you see it presented in an alien culture that, okay, you have these ideas, let's take these ideas to their logical conclusion. Let's create a world where the females are referred to as females. They're not allowed to participate in business at all by law. They are kept at home and nude at all times. They're not allowed to say anything. They're strictly just there to chew your food and make life easy for the men and massage your earlobes.
Yeah, umoxing.
Right. It is an argument from absurdity. Even the passive sexist would say that and see, oh, well, that's not cool. They're really treating these women poorly.
Right.
So sometimes you have to make an argument absurd and take it to its logical conclusion for people to see how ridiculous it is.
Sure.
And I think that episode did that really well with feminism.
Sure.
And not that feminism is ridiculous, that anti-feminism and sexism is ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ellen, do you have any thoughts on that episode? What did you?
Yeah, I thought that episode was really powerful. When Quark's mother says that your father never had the lobes for business, and she was the mastermind behind the empire that she had with him all along.
And she would have been able to keep going if she had only kept quiet about it, but she didn't want to keep quiet. She wanted to advocate for her rights. She got bold.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How many business? She had several businesses running.
Yeah, there was all these different accounts. It was amazing. It was awesome. Yeah. Quark was really impressed. He's like, "Wow, how did you?"
She had more money than Quark.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I just thought it was a really great statement. Also, there was some really touching moments in that episode, where Quark's mom was she was actually sitting with Rom in the bedroom. And she was like, all right, I'll get naked just for you. And then she's hugging him and petting his head. And he's because he was the nice one that was being supportive of her endeavors. So she was willing to do the traditional female thing.
Right, because he wasn't a misogynist about it.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah, bingo. Yeah, that's a great point to bring up. That's interesting. And which kind of goes to show you can choose to be that kind of mother as well, right?
Oh, yeah.
And, but you just it's all about the respect, and I think that's a great point to bring up, Ellen.
Yeah. And she definitely deserved it. And I also loved when she got with the Grand Nagus. That added a whole new dimension of hilarity to it. Because
she became like Grand Nagus at one point.
She became Grand Nagus.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, keep going.
I just thought the character of Grand Nagus was brilliant, and the actor that played what was his name?
The actor that played Zek, I know who it is, and I can't think of it.
Well, he was also in The Princess Bride.
Yes. Yeah, he's the guy that kept saying indubitably.
Indubitably.
Yeah.
I'm picturing his face. Yeah.
DPR. Yeah.
Yeah, that was such a fun, awesome character. Like every time the Grand Nagus came on screen, I was like, it's another one of these episodes. Because you always know something fun is coming when you see him.
Exactly. I love it. All right, so what? Any more on that one, or?
No, I think we can go on to number 3.
Okay. Yeah, I enjoyed it too. And exactly for those reasons. I love the fact that it's feminist. I think that needed to be made. That statement needed to be made in Star Trek, even if you think that it's all been well beyond it and whatever. No, let it be said, because I think some people would consider Gene Roddenberry to be sexist, perhaps in certain ways, And so I think for them to hit that home, was important. And that the entire Star Trek universe isn't the Orion Animal Women. Not that I'm, me myself, not that I mind that, but you know what I mean. So anyway, they'd kind of retcon that sort of thing anyway as well. So, okay, so let's go on. This is the one where both you and Ellen independently, because this was not discussed. We discussed it today over lunch, but when we were asking what were the 3 episodes, you two had already decided, on your own. And then when this came up, it's like, oh yeah. And it was like the first one. So, the episode is Rejoined is the name of it.
Yep.
And this is also from season 3. Now I'll give the quick summary, and the quick summary is that Jadzia, a woman comes on, I think her name was Liana or something like that, comes on board the station. And this woman has a symbiote from a past life where she was the wife, and Dax was the husband, and the husband died in a shuttle accident. And so she was a widow for a while, and she really had to sit with these feelings of being alone and everything. And then suddenly, now what you find out is that in Trill society, and the way that the symbiote program is set up, which not everybody has a symbiote, is that they're not supposed to. It seems that because the way with Curzon and the way all that could react or interact, or how she interacted with the Klingons, you could recognize past lives, but you couldn't really seem to recognize past lovers, or marriages or things like this, really intense relationships weren't allowed to continue.
The way they described it was that it was preventing personal growth that's supposed to come with living 10 lifetimes.
Right.
If you just keep going back to the same partner over and over again, how are you going to grow and learn from other partners who might challenge you in different ways? Yeah,
exactly. So, so they end up meeting. The thing is now Dax is a woman, and not the husband.
Yep.
Now, not a male.
Now they're both women.
And it was such a, for lack of a better term, unrequited love. It was, there was a loss, there was a major loss. It was such a tragic.
They had a lot of unfinished business.
Yeah, it was a tragic love. That's the word I want to use. It was a tragic love that, maybe they wanted to start picking business back up. And this ends up with one of the very first, it's debatable on dates, woman-to-woman kisses. Lesbian kisses in television history, which Star Trek is not new to breaking new ground with that. Certainly you had Plato's Stepchildren from the original series where Kirk and Uhura, it was the first interracial kiss on television. And so this is the first lesbian, or one of the first lesbian kisses on TV. And that's really huge. And I think that makes it stand out for just about everybody. But I'm sure you two have, maybe in that vein, but you have very good reasons as to why this stands out. Stephanie, if you want to go first, then we'll go to Ellen, and then we're going to get the rest of your list, Ellen. So,
okay.
Which I can't wait to cover.
Sure. Well, okay, so we had talked before about the theme of the character of Dax and just how interesting that was for exploring all different kinds of ideas. And just the idea that we had just talked about of is it a good idea to go back to your ex? Because to a certain extent, you could say, like, okay, we had that relationship. We learned from it. There's a reason why we broke up. Even if it was tragic, right? It was in the past. And should we go back there again? Maybe you see an ex later and you're still attracted to them, and you're always going to be attracted to them from just a pure chemical level. But, even years go by and there was still reasons you broke up, and they might still be present. And also, like, if you keep going back to the same person, you may not have the opportunity to learn and grow from new partners and to challenge yourself and to find partners who fit where you're at that moment in your life. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was a really interesting theme to explore, right? Like, you might feel a chemistry that pulls you to an ex, but is it right to actually explore it? And is it just because it's a forbidden fruit? Do you partly just feel that chemistry because it's not allowed?
Sure, a lot of people go through this sort of thing.
A lot of people struggle with it, and I think anyone can relate to that, and especially if you had the chance to, like, be back with a dead lover or somebody that you lost suddenly or something like that. Like, the pull,
rising from the grave.
Yeah, the pull would be almost unimaginable. And, of course, we see that later on with Worf, where Dax enters a new host, Ezri, and Worf doesn't want anything to do with her because he says, nope, you're not Jadzia. And we can't be together. We can't even really talk to each other. And she's like, well, it's still me. I'm in a different body, but it's still me. And he's like, nope, it's not you.
Sure.
And they're both right in a way. So anyway, I like that. I like the ability to explore that with the Trill and the symbiont. Of course, there's another reason why I really like this episode, which was just that I thought it was extremely sexy. It was just the kiss was amazing, just really well acted. You could really see the passion. And I just love that they gave two women screen time like that, where it was like, no, they have genuine feelings for each other. They were married. It's not just like teehee, we're getting drunk and we're going to kiss to, like, impress the guys. It was like they really loved each other. And I just thought that was really important to have on TV. I'm sure that might have been one of the reasons why Terry Farrell wanted to quit, because, she probably got so much shit for that. I think they got letters, like angry letters of protest, into in Paramount and CBS or whatever, whoever was.
I hope not.
Yeah, I could imagine that. I'm kind of glad. I mean, I'm glad that it happened for a few reasons, but one of the reasons is there were scripts for the Next Generation that had to do with gay characters. Mm-hmm. Not just like the asexual one that everybody remembers that Riker was involved in, but like genuinely, like, this is going to be, about homosexuality. It's going to be two men, all this. Mm-hmm. And it was like for the second season of the show, and Paramount said, no, you're not putting this on TV at all. So I'm glad they finally grew up, and at least allowed it to be on.
But you have to remember, this was in the 90s. This was during the era of don't ask, don't tell in the military, where people had, like, these weird ideas about gay people. This was when there really were no gay characters on TV shows. There was, like, Ellen DeGeneres and Rosie O'Donnell were, like, the only, like, publicly known lesbians, and they didn't even come out and say directly that they were lesbians.
No, and they would only allow people that were that came off as kind of weird, as to where, Dax was, not straight-laced, I don't want to say that, but she was serious, career woman, scientist, whole thing, and so for somebody quote-unquote normal, to be able to be portrayed that way is, I think, a very powerful
and
thing.
She was femme.
Yeah, right, she was quite femme, she had a very conventionally female look.
And she had male, like, partners and lovers on the show as well. She fell in love with men.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
She's bisexual.
Yeah, she was quite the... she played the field a bit too in that show, which, I mean, that's all right.
Yeah, she did.
Ellen, I mean, Rejoined, what did it for you with this episode?
So, I guess the biggest thing that drew me to this, I'll get to in a minute, but I wanted to go back to something that Stephanie had discussed about not going back to exes. And I think in this episode, it was very unique because Jadzia and her ex, Dax and his ex, they weren't separated voluntarily. Like, from what I understand, they're still very in love, and then there was the accident, so they weren't able to see each other.
Or say goodbye.
Yeah, or say goodbye, or, wrap up whatever it was that was going on in their relationship. So I imagine that was, like, very powerful to them. Like, they weren't exactly separated. So it was like they were torn apart.
Yeah.
And when they finally found each other again, it brought back all of those feelings. And Jadzia had grown with Dax, and because of that, her feelings of like protection had grown, and care for this person, and some sort of nostalgia, I'm sure, too. But
she was also angry because I think she says, or one of them says to the other at a certain point, like, I was so mad at you. You took a risk by going on that shuttle, and you could have avoided it, but you were gone, and I was so mad at you, but I missed you so much. And like all those feelings come up. But then after you've gotten over it and accepted that the person is gone, and then they just pop back up again, that must be really hard.
Yeah, but it's also really hard to find somebody that you love that much, and once you find someone like that, you really want to hang on to them.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But anyway, the thing that I loved most about that episode was that there's a conversation that happened right before the really amazing sexy kiss, where what is the name of the woman that was Dax's wife?
I think it's Liana.
Liana, okay.
Something like that.
So she walks into Dax's room, and she's all fuming because she just had this conversation with her brother about how he thinks that something is going on with her and Dax.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's
against it.
Yeah, he doesn't want to see anything like that happen. And Dax is like, oh, I care about you. I want to protect you. I don't want people getting the wrong idea because that's not what you want. And that's when Liana and Dax have their amazing bonding moment. But I just thought that was a really challenging moment because Liana is struggling in that instant with image. How do I present myself to other people? I do have feelings for Dax still, even though now she's a woman.
Right.
But I don't want to be seen as a lesbian or bisexual.
Well, they were more concerned about being seen as being rejoined, and that was the taboo in the Trill Society. But like, you could easily just replace that with being gay, and your family doesn't accept you.
Because I think they're just using that as the abstract of not being accepted.
Yeah, for sure. That's right.
Yeah, because the conversation that they were having seemed very real and relatable.
Oh yeah.
When Liana said that her brother thinks something is going on, and Jadzia said, well, maybe we shouldn't be spending time together then, because I don't want to give anyone the wrong idea. And I could really see that happening with somebody who's not confident or sure about themselves as far as having feelings for somebody of the same sex, or I guess in their instance, somebody who they were with in a previous life.
Sure.
But that was a really touching moment because there's so much conflict wrapped up in that. It seemed like the whole world was against them, and despite that, their feelings were so powerful that they couldn't deny it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll say quickly that, certainly the kiss was sexy, no doubt about that, okay? And honestly, I think what was even hotter, and I don't mean to make this like a guy thing, but it was hotter that I thought, because there's a point where Kira just says, when they're talking, she's talking with someone about the rejoining process and how this isn't allowed and all that stuff. And Kira just says, just fucking do it. Like, just get together already. And like, it was just so awesome to have another woman say, no, that's totally fine. And which maybe for me, like cause I would rank this episode very high as well. But for the point that, and I bring this up often on Sovereign Tech, we live in a permission-based culture where we're constantly told from birth, you have to ask to do this. You have to ask to do this. And certainly, yes, in respecting another individual, you do want to ask to do things. Okay. Consent and asking, and consent and permission, can kind of be two different things depending on what you're talking about here. But to see on TV two women kissing, for me, especially at that time, a teenager, really was on Star Trek, which is, which I hold as a holy grail, gave me the permission to think, coming out of a religious upbringing, no, you know what, that's fine. That's all right. Yeah, they're doing it. So, because, as much as I don't want to think that I fall prey to permission-based culture, I certainly did as a teenager, just as I think most of us do. And it was great to finally have permission to say, this is completely normal and you're going to do it, and, and all right. So I think that it's a very important episode for that reason. And mean, honestly, in my own life, not much longer after I can remember that, well, I mean, it'd be a few years, I suppose, but, I would be in a situation where I would see like a girlfriend of mine regularly kissing another woman. And I don't know how I would have dealt with that, honestly, if I didn't have this episode to say, no, this is good. This is all right. And so I think that's really important for people for something to be out there loud and proud about it. And if it's Star Trek, damn right, because then it looks cool, and then it always has a point, yeah. And when it's science fiction, it makes it great.
Yeah, that's such a good point, that people do need role models oftentimes to show them how to do something that is a bit unconventional.
Yeah, so many people, I mean, I think so many people could break free from a lot of their little internal prisons if someone just tells them it's okay, or someone just models for them that it's okay. You can break away from this. So yeah, very important episode. I not surprising at all that was picked by two people in this triad here. So anyway, so all right, Ellen, does anybody else have anything else they want to say on that? Yeah, go for it.
Can we pause for a second?
Can we pause? Yeah. Yes, we can pause. We can do whatever you want. Ooh, and we are recording. So, all right, we'll go to Ellen's. Rejoined was on your list, so that's one of your three, and that was also one of Stephanie's three. I really should have done this where we did one at a time. That one of us wasn't like talking for a while. But I'll remember that, because we're going to do, hopefully next month, we'll do Voyager. And then, we'll just kind of keep building up on this, which that'll be fun. Though me trying to pick a top 3 Voyager episodes, that's going to be tough as hell. But Ellen, anyway, let's get into your list. So Rejoined, we mentioned that. The next one would actually be The Search, part 1 and 2, which this is the episode where Odo gets to go home. And it's not only that, though, because this is also an episode, and actually it was going to be in my honorable mentions, not for the reason of Odo going to his homeworld, which I think is, your reasons for that are really cool and I want to hear them. But this is the episode where we get the Defiant. This is where, suddenly Deep Space Nine seems to kind of admit that as cool as it is to have a space station, sometimes we got to go places and a runabout isn't enough. We need an actual starship. And so they bring in the Defiant, which is, in my opinion, a really, really cool starship, for a lot of reasons that maybe I could mention later. But the main thing that happens here is they get the Defiant, and so they're trying to find the homeworld of the Dominion, which is this new, threat from the Gamma Quadrant through the wormhole that the Federation is having to deal with. There hasn't been like a formal declaration of war yet, which that would be something that would happen later on in Deep Space Nine. But in it, we definitely find the homeworld of what's known as the Founders, which are the founders of the Dominion, which turns out to be Odo's race. And it's a pretty amazing moment. It's a 2-parter, and it's an amazing moment when, well, I mean, there's some of the visuals I remember when I was watching it, way back in, I guess this would have been like 94, 95 when it first came on, were really stunning, because when you go to the homeworld of the Changelings, like, it's just the sea of, you've seen Odo in a liquid form, but then suddenly you see, thousands or millions of these things. I mean, it is really, really something. But yeah, Odo gets home. So, if there's more plot points to it that you want to discuss, go ahead, or, and also say like what hit it for you with this episode.
Yeah, well, as I discussed earlier, Odo is one of my favorite characters because he has lived his life so long in a state of isolation, and is kind of, he's very unsure about who he is. Yeah. He's always wondered about his family and his people and his home planet. In this episode, he actually gets to fulfill those things that he wanted to find out, and it was very touching because of that. It was kind of a heart-wrenching thing to see him go to his home planet and actually get to walk into the sea of his people.
Yeah.
To intermingle with their gooiness, and
well, you find that's a very like intimate act that happens.
Absolutely.
That they never describe totally in words, because they say you can't. You can't describe it in words. Just how powerful it is when one changeling liquefies into another. It's really a powerful thing.
Because they share experiences, they share their existence in that moment. And I can't even imagine how like euphoric and heavenly it must be to just wade into a sea of like all of the other changelings.
Yeah, I love the thought of it. Yeah.
It's just such a cool concept, and the sea itself looked really cool. It was like molten gold almost.
Yeah, it was really powerful. And like you just kind of like in the first, I remember at the end of the first, because it's 2-parter, and at the end of the first parter, like when the main kind of matriarch sort of the changeling of the founders is walking out, like you're just like, holy shit, it's another fucking changeling, you know, like that's so wild. But what more do you have on?
Yeah, so I mean, the whole episode, I guess, was kind of about discovering and exploring and defining this race of beings that Odo belongs to. But, you know, the most powerful thing to me, of course, was just that he was able to reconnect with that part of his past.
Well, yeah, that undertext of you finally find home. You know, and you find your actual community and where you belong, and people that, and I think a lot, especially honestly, a lot of Star Trek fans who, especially in the 90s, but even today, who, you know, people that watch it now, were social outcasts themselves, you know, and like, I remember going to the convention scene all the time in the 90s, and like, you just
felt
suddenly,
like walking into that sea.
You know, I mean, you know, like the universe is always vibrating, right? Or something like that. And then suddenly you find a place where it just goes quiet. Mm-hmm. You're just like, I don't have to vibrate. I don't have, like, everything can just be peaceful. And here's my people. And you just like, it is such a powerful, powerful feeling. And for Odo to get that, and kudos to Rene Auberjonois, the actor who played Odo, for being able to parlay through that makeup, that almost, it's not lust. It's just this euphoric feeling that he obviously got as soon as he made actual contact, you know, with that sea, with the link. I think that's what they called it. It's like the Great Link or something. And man, like, you got it. And yeah, I think that undertext, a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah. And I mean, it does change over time, because then you find out the founders are actually an insidious race that are kind of like seeping their roots into the political systems and like being the puppet masters for these wars.
And everybody gets really paranoid, because they're like, anyone could be a changeling.
But
right.
See, but that's what made the Founder such an interesting villain, you know, because you know why. Like, unlike Disney and a bunch of other, like, you know, movie organizations and in Hollywood today who fails at making compelling villains, you knew why the Founders were bad, because they were oppressed, because everybody was originally afraid of them, even when they were nice, when they were peaceful. Yeah. Everybody was afraid of them, and so they had to create a system that protected themselves from, and they created the Jem'Hadar, and they created all these different things because everybody was afraid of them, because just like you described, you know, exactly what they would do to subvert another civilization is they would, you know, you never knew who was a Founder, who was a changeling, which made for some great stories in the series. Do you have more, Ellen?
Yeah. Well, it's not necessarily in relation to this episode. I mean, I think this episode certainly started it, when Odo goes home and he gets that sense of oneness with his people, but then over time he finds out all of these evil things that the Founders are doing, and I think that isolates him even further, and then he realizes, you know, maybe his home doesn't exactly have to be with his same species.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The individual versus the community, right, in a way. Yeah, sure. That's a powerful underlying thing as well.
That's actually almost similar to the one where Kira is questioning, like, who she is, too,
sure,
because like, he finally gets reunited with his people and he thinks everything's going to be fine, but then he realizes, though, they're not actually that nice.
Yeah,
like I thought they were.
I mean, and maybe that explains why those two fall in love, because they do have that similar experience, or why there is that always that love there, because, you know, they can relate on that level between Kira and Odo.
Did they ever say how Odo ended up getting split off and got onto that asteroid?
Yeah, the Founders like sent out probes of other places, sadly, to conquer. And he just happened to be one of those.
Yeah, and that's how he found his way home, because they sent him out, but they also implanted in him this sort of like internal compass to lead him back home.
Yeah. Anything else on that episode, or?
I think I'm ready to move on to the next one.
All right. Well, I'll ask you this. I mean, how did you feel about the introduction of the Defiant? Like, when they brought that in, did that change anything for you with Deep Space Nine, or was it like, okay, cool, we got a starship?
Yeah, it did change it a little bit. I mean, you're right that Deep Space Nine is great as a space station, but you know, going out and adventuring sometimes is necessary. Like, I was really relieved when they would show scenes of like being on a planet or outside, because most of the filming was done in the station, and it was all very, you know, artificial and metallic. but I just, at first I kind of resisted that change because I was like, oh, they're just trying to make it like the Next Generation or the original series where they're, going out and exploring. But in the end, it turned out to be a really good addition because it was a really cool ship. And it was fun to see the other characters, get out of their regular environment and explore these, like the new facet of just adding that whole dynamic of traveling in.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephanie, anything quick on how you feel about the Defiant being introduced to Deep Space Nine?
I thought it was needed because it was getting a little stagnant. They were just staying there.
Well, they had genuine ratings problems.
Yeah.
Like what Ellen picked up on, I think was true. I mean, or I know was true, is that they really had ratings problems, and I think they felt, okay, we need a starship, otherwise we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but it was good. It was good to have sort of both of those in there.
Yeah, I love the way that it was always described as like it's severely like overpowered, but it can't like it can't handle what they've put into it, and I love that kind of like hot rodding of starships and everything. Like that excites the hell out of me. I mean, like I couldn't wait. I remember as soon as they introduced the Defiant, I couldn't wait for the technical manual to come out. And like, I'm just going to tear into this. This is going to be so fucking cool. And the fact that it was finally a Starfleet ship that had a cloaking device, that's a huge conversation I'd love to have. Maybe at one of these Star Trek updates in the future, we can kind of talk about the ethics of the Federation, because
that was controversial too.
That was wild. And another part of Deep Space Nine that was wildly controversial that I think we might get into a little bit later. So yeah, I loved it when they brought on the Defiant. I think it's such a cool little ship. Lots of fun and needed. So
how did they get around that? Because the Federation was never supposed to have cloaking technology.
So this is a dropped. This is the part that I don't like that they dropped, because originally it was on loan from the Romulans, and they actually had in the episode The Search Part 1 and 2, they had a Romulan like sub-commander or lieutenant or something that was supposed to be stationed on the Defiant at all times to
oversee the cloak,
to oversee the use of the cloak. And they ended up just writing that character off, which I thought kind of stunk. I would have loved a Romulan main character.
Oh, yeah.
Female one at that, female. And, but that's how they explained it. But then they just kind of like ran with it. But you end up with other Defiant class ships, but they don't have cloaking devices, or, well, they're not supposed to. That's kind of the only one that was supposed to have them. So, nice addition to the show. So, Ellen, okay, your next episode, and this is a great pick. I'm glad you thought of this, because I didn't forget it, but I didn't think of it, because it really deserves to be in a top. It could easily fit in anybody's top 3 list, and that's Far Beyond the Stars. And what this is Sisko gets a vision from the prophets, or he gets put on this kind of vision, and the vision is him in like the 1950s. And he's a science fiction writer named Benny Russell. And not only is he there, but his other, the other cast members are there playing various parts. Kira is actually a woman science fiction writer, but she can't let anybody know that she's a woman. Just like the character of Benny Russell can't let anybody know that he's black, and he's writing science fiction for what is effectively like Analog or Amazing Stories of its day. And he... you end up dealing with 1950s America being black, and most importantly, but then also parts of it of being a woman and everything. And it explores this entire area where you think that science fiction is so progressive. I think it explored the absolute reality of what was going on at that time in science fiction. And then, of course, just in America in general. And
he's writing a story about Deep Space Nine, right?
Yeah. And why the prophets give him this vision and everything. I mean, that, there's some clear-cut cases or clear-cut reasons, but then there's a lot of ambiguity to it all. But it's a fascinating exploration of the 1950s, through this lens. Ellen, what, if you have plot points to bring up, of course, bring those up. And, what did it for you? What put this on your list?
So, first of all, this episode was just fun to watch in general, because you get to see the characters outside of their makeup.
Yes.
Right. Like everybody's in there, Quark, Odo, Kira, but they're not in their makeup.
Yeah.
I think, is Worf in there too? I think he's in this one.
Oh, now that I think,
I don't think Worf is in it.
I'm not sure if Michael Dorn was there, because this was like season 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, which by the way, The Search was season 3. But anyway, this was season 6. So Worf probably was there somehow.
Okay, I do remember seeing Michael Dorn without his Klingon makeup. I don't know if it was this episode, but it was just very cool to see the characters as humans.
Yeah, that is interesting. Good point.
Armin Shimmerman was the one that really stood out to me because he's like this little Jewish guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it. It was interesting because like you can see the parallels between their characters in the way that they acted out their human characters, because they are kind of a projection of the way that Cisco sees them, but through this vision. So I thought that was a nice bit of like fan service that the writers were doing. But also I guess my favorite part of this episode was that what his name in the story was what?
Benny Russell.
Benny?
Yeah.
Yes. So he Ben is a very brave person for, even working at this publisher that, writing stories. He comes up with his own, and he wants to see what sort of reception it gets from the general public, even though he's an African American. And the reality of the time was that the blacks were being treated horribly.
Yeah.
Civil rights weren't really a thing yet. And it didn't matter to him. He just wanted to create this idea that he had and put it out there. And he thought that it wouldn't matter who was behind the pen. Like, if you read the story and you like it, that's all that matters.
Wasn't he debating whether to say in the story that Cisco was black?
Well, that's the thing, is that's the other part of it too. Not only who he was, but what he was even portraying in the story was very, risque for the time, racially and otherwise. So yeah, I mean, and he got it. And then when people find out about the story, oh shit, and who wrote it, oh shit, and just a million oh shit moments that end up in real oppression and violence. Right.
Which is really, really unfair, especially in the episode where the magazine is going to the editor, I think, and they completely throw it out. They're like, scrap the whole thing. We're not printing this month because the publisher didn't like it. And then Ben stands up. He's like, what do you mean they didn't like it? What didn't they like about it? They didn't like the story that he wrote because there was a black man as the main character. And that's when he kind of goes off the rails, and he's like, no, I'm not going to be calm about this. Being calm never got me anywhere. And then he's, it was such a powerful moment because he realizes that nobody can hurt him anymore, that he's going to continue creating and living and saying and thinking all of the things that he does, and nobody can stop him from doing that, even if he goes to jail, even if he gets fired. And I just thought that was such a beautiful, powerful moment.
Yeah.
And it sort of also was saying that, like, the future gets better. Like, that character knew, even though he was being really oppressed, he knew that in the future, a black man could be the commander of a space station. He knew that the future was going to get better. And so Cisco should know that in the present moment, too, that the future is going to get better. And there won't always be wars and, like, trouble from the Gamma Quadrant and all that stuff.
Yeah, and the fighting that you do right now is what is going to lead to that better future. So even if things kind of suck, I mean, if you push through it, then you can lead to that. You can help create that better future.
Yeah, I think even though Star Trek shows that future where a lot of these prejudices and hatreds and all these other things don't really exist, or at least have been ignored by the humans in any case, Star Trek has a knack and a history of consistently saying, like I'm thinking of The Next Generation, the episode The Drumhead, where Picard says, these people, we think we've gone past witch hunting and all this other stuff. He says, but it's just waiting to come back. Like it's for someone to thrive on it. And I like that. I like the fact that Star Trek, even though it's trying to be past all of that, it still says, no, hold on. You got to watch out for this. Here are the signs, because this can always come back. Even like Star Trek Insurrection, the movie, talking about forced relocations and a lot of these other things. And I think that's good. Remind people that, we haven't always had this shit licked, and it's just, at any point it could come back, which I think speaks to today as much as it does to the 1990s, where I think a lot of people would feel, it's liberal paradise.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things he says in that episode too is that you can't destroy an idea,
Right.
even if it's a good one or a bad one. So always know that the world is imperfect and that you have to continuously, make sure that you're doing all that you can to help be a part of the solution.
Sure, fair. So
I like that pick.
Yeah, Far Beyond the Stars, awesome episode. I think that might have won like a Saturn. That might have won some.
I think
some
it
awards,
did.
which
Yeah,
it's totally deserving of. Anything else on that one, Ellen? Or
No, you can't destroy an idea.
yeah,
It's all in here in your bubble universe.
At first, it is a very fun episode. Like, it is cool to see these actors acting in a different way, for one, and then not having the makeup and all that, which is cool. And Deep Space Nine would be a fun episode, or a fun show at times, like when they bring in the character of Vic Fontaine, who I really thought that he was a lot of fun, and then, the holo novels and everything else that they would do with that. Okay, well, I'm going to get into my top three, and we'll try and wrap this up pretty quickly. And we have some honorable mentions that we got to bring up. We will get to those.
I have another honorable mention that I didn't put on your list, so I'm going to look it up real quick.
Okay, all right, you go for it.
Yeah,
you go for it and look it up real quick. So for my list, in fact, while speaking of fun, this was an episode that I think was a lot of fun and was a melding of a couple of worlds for me. And the episode was Our Man Bashir from season 4, where Dr. Bashir him and Garrick are having fun playing like this James Bond-esque character. Particularly Bashir is playing more of the James Bond character. And and in the Hollow Suite, it's all taking place in the 1960s and everything. So he's really playing this up. And I was a James Bond fan, not so much Sean Connery. That wasn't my bag. But I was a James Bond fan at the time. So this is a very nice melding of my love of spy fiction as well as science fiction. And oh man, so what happens is that there's a accident, I think, on a runabout, and they have to transport a lot of the primary crew over to Deep Space Nine. But in doing so, there's a problem with the transporter, and so they have to put their patterns, which there's all kinds of scientific problems with that, but they have to put their patterns into the holosuite. Throughout the main computer of Deep Space Nine, and they kind of take their physical manifestations within the holosuite. And so Bashir ends up not being able to leave the holosuite, and the holosuite safety protocols all turn off. But some of the characters, the villains that he's encountering, and not just villains, but a lot of the characters he's encountering in this James Bond story are actually his friends. And if he kills them in the holosuite, they're going to die in real life too. First off, the episode's a ton of fun, and it's another one kind of like Far Beyond the Stars, Ellen, where the actors don't have to have their makeup on, or some of them, they get to act differently. They have their makeup on, but they get to act differently, which is really cool. Like Cisco gets, Avery Brooks gets to play this crazy mad scientist, villain character, which is a lot of fun. Of course, Nana Visitor as Kira, she's in this, she plays this Russian agent, and I can't tell you what that did for my fantasies. That was really she played it. And then there is also another, actually, I consider it one of the, well, I've talked about this in previous Star Trek updates, because someone asked, what did I think was one of the hottest moments in Star Trek history? Obviously, the kiss was on there from Rejoined, but the other one also had Jadzia Dax in it. Dr. Bashir is tied up to this reactor's about to go off, and she's playing this character, Dr. Honeybear. And he's doing the classic James Bond things where he's trying to kind of seduce this gal to set him free. Right. And she just she has glasses on. He's you would look so great, if you took your glasses off, whatever. She actually looked better with the glasses on, but that doesn't matter. She takes the glasses off. He's oh, and if your hair was free, and then she takes off this pin in her hair and just kind of whips it around. And I just remember as a teenager, I was just oh my God. That was so hot.
At the time, it was a popular hairstyle to put your hair up in a bun with chopsticks. Do you remember this,
Yes.
Ellen?
Oh, yes, of course. I did it, too.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Me too.
So Dr. Honeybear does that, and then, there's the kiss. She does set him free and everything, and then I just thought that was a lot of fun. And but so there's the fun aspect of it, and there's the enjoyable part of these characters being in different roles for once. But what was also really cool about it was Garrick's in this whole time, and he's pointing out, as he often does throughout the series, the flaws in human thinking, saying no, you don't understand. We're going to die here. Okay. Like these people, these aren't even necessarily the real people. Sure, they might die, but like the whole station's in danger, everything. You're going to have to, guess what? When you're actually a spy, because of course Garrick knows what it's like to be a spy in the Obsidian Order. He says, when you're actually a spy, you've got to make some tough decisions and people have to die. And you're going to have to start. I mean, he's almost making fun of all the James Bond stories, which is kind of cool too.
Mm-hmm. And he's like Murray Rothbard pointing out the cantankerous contradactions and
sure.
contrarian things.
Right, but with a little more intelligent, yeah. So Garrick, is just pointing all these things out, and it's so much fun. I mean, and he's right. Like he's saying, like, look, this isn't fun. This isn't fiction at this point. You need to do something about this. And there's even a point where Bashir shoots Garrick, like in the neck. And Garrick, and what was amazing is Garrick says, he's like, I didn't think you had the stones. I didn't think you had the guts to do that sort of thing. He's like, who am I to doubt, secret agent Julian Bashir? And it's something that would come into play later on in the show, but there was so much going on in that episode. I really enjoyed it. I mean, it's fun, it's sexy, it has a message, it's serious, and it has like things to say about, some of the fiction that we enjoy at times that I thought was really cool. So, I love that episode to death. I've watched it way too many times, and I'm not going to give like the exact number, even if I might know it. So, okay. Does anyone have any comments on this episode that they want to do you remember it? What did
I
you
remember
think
it. Yeah, I remember Garrick getting shot in the neck, as he said.
Yeah.
And yeah, like they're friends, so it's a big deal for him to shoot him.
Yeah, right. And Garrick,
he's like his only friend.
Right. And well, I mean, for Garrick, Bashir is his only friend.
Yeah. They have lunch
O'Brien.
together
Yeah.
every day or every week or something. But then Bashir always says, I have lunch with him every day and I don't know him. I feel like I don't know him at all.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like for a doctor to shoot somebody is kind of a twisted moment in a way.
For sure.
When you really think about it. But again, the character, you'll understand more about that as they explore the character of Bashir more. Ellen, did you have any thoughts on this episode?
Yeah, I just thought it was so cool that Garrick was like teaching Bashir his secret trade.
Yeah.
Like sort of training him, setting him up for what was to come later.
Yeah.
But also it allowed Bashir to really expand his character. So he's not just like the really smart doctor with an accent. Now he's also got this extra skill set where he's like a super spy.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, that'll play into something during our honorable mentions. But I'll go to my next episode, which this one is a very personal one. And it doesn't really have like the best reasons to be in my top 3 other than it has one singular moment that just like, I think I've always, it's meant a lot to me, and I've kind of held on to it in very, very personal ways. But the episode's Paradise from season 2, kind of a forgettable episode for a lot of people. What happens is O'Brien and Sisko are they're exploring this area of space. They're runabout, or they beam down to a planet, and suddenly they can't beam back to the runabout. What the hell happened? And they find out that there's this human this human ship that crash landed there a few years previous, and none of their electronics work. And and so they're like, wow, what's going on here? And so that's why they can't beam back up to the runabout. Then they find that there's this woman who's there, who's kind of this very charismatic leader.
She's kind of like a cult leader.
Yeah, and she's teaching them how to get back in touch with their humanity, like all these people, and like they're rebuilding, a kind of
they're rewilding.
Yeah, they're rewilding. That's exactly.
They're growing their own food. They're building their own structures.
Right.
They're marrying off and having children.
Yeah. Now O'Brien and Sisko, being Starfleet officers, are like, well, no, we can solve anything. We'll figure out why electronics don't work here. You people should have this stuff, and we need to get back to our station.
Especially O'Brien, yeah.
Yeah,
he's the engineer. He can figure anything out.
Right. And so the community, and particularly the woman leader, keeps saying, why don't you just stay here? Why don't you just stay with us? There's nothing you can do. Accept your fate. And it gets to the point where they start to get punished for not accepting their fate.
Mm-hmm.
And the punishment in that episode is so fucked up.
Yeah, they get the box. Like there's this box that they have, and they just put you in there, no water, and the heat just, bakes you. And eventually, like O'Brien tries to figure stuff out, and Sisko says, when they go to put O'Brien in the box, Sisko says, no, I'm his captain, I'm his commanding officer. You punish me. And they put him in there in his Starfleet uniform, which is important. And he, and like every day or every couple days they have him out. It's like, look, take off the Starfleet uniform, which is symbolic of him accepting his fate.
Mm-hmm.
Take off the Starfleet uniform and I'll give you some water. and all this can end. Just take off the Starfleet uniform. And there's another point, and like Sisko's just, Avery Brooks is at the height of his acting, and like there's a point where he just falls to his knees, wearing his uniform, and he just kind of shakes his head a little bit, when they said just take off the uniform, and he just won't do it. And instead of them picking him up and putting him in the box, he walks back into the box himself. And I thought it was just such a powerful fucking moment. And I love that like, no matter what, he would not take off that Starfleet uniform. And I just thought that was so badass, and I don't know, like to hold on to your ideals so hard that you'll go walk right back into the punishment. Just drop my phone. I get all animated about this. Anyway, I thought that moment was so awesome. A fun episode, really, really cool. And it had some commentary on the idea of, are humans losing touch with themselves by having, such advanced technology and everything. And there's something to be discussed with that, but I'm not going to do that here. The main thing was just like Sisko holding on to Starfleet like that. And I thought that was just really powerful. So yeah, that's in my top 3. And my last one is the Maquis, part 1 and 2 from season 3, another season 3 winner when that show really took off. The Maquis was great for me because the Maquis is this, I think everybody kind of knows the gist, but the Maquis, there's this border dispute between the Federation and Cardassians, and there's this area of space that is going to end up going to the Cardassians where there were Federation colonies. And the people that live there don't want to give it up. And so they start their own little resistance movement called the Maquis. And they start taking on the Cardassians, who are also breaking this treaty that they're making and everything. And what's really great about this was that it put on display in Star Trek the fact that there are human organizations besides Starfleet. That's what really stuck out for me with this. Not so much that I agreed with the Maquis necessarily, but it was just so cool to finally see like, oh, you can root for humans without it necessarily being Starfleet, because, I could understand where some people might have some real philosophical problems with what Starfleet does. And so that's what really made the Maquis stand out for me was just to finally have that moment where there's, not everybody, it's you can have all your high ideals when everything's going right. Like you can have that benevolent dictatorship as long as things are benevolent. And then once things aren't benevolent, oh, that's not such a great idea now, is it? And so to see humans like really struggling and a lot of this other stuff, that was just really wild and a first time for Star Trek, I think, or one of the more pronounced times in Star Trek that really stands out. That showed DS9 as a different show. So
Starfleet didn't even want the Maquis around, did they? Because
no,
the Maquis
criminals.
were Federation citizens,
right?
But they were doing illegal activities.
Well, yeah, by their treaty, and and you end up, the Maquis end up playing a huge part in Star Trek Voyager, which we'll be talking about, that next month maybe, and. Yeah, it's a fascinating exploration of, what happens when all this, wanting to keep peace doesn't work out so well for some of these humans on their colonies. And, oh, shit, it's kind of like you were saying earlier, Ellen, where, once things kind of break down a little bit, some of these parts of humanity will come back. And not to say that the Maquis were necessarily evil. But
no, they got screwed.
Yeah, they really did get screwed.
So they were just fighting back.
Yeah.
What else are they supposed to do?
Right. It was an interesting exploration, but I just loved that idea that there were people who, because that's what I'm like my favorite, maybe, well, it's not exactly my favorite. One of my favorite Star Trek movies is Star Trek 3, where Kirk goes renegade. I like Insurrection for the same reason, because Picard goes renegade, and says, no, Starfleet's wrong this time. And that's kind of comforting too, just that like it's not so blind. I mean, like I love the fact in Paradise that Sisko holds on to a Starfleet uniform, but at the same time, now Starfleet can be dead wrong on a mass scale, and people will do something about it, which I think is really cool. That humans are still, able to go that distance. So there's my top 3. We can get into some of the honorable mentions. And then I think we can wrap this up. This has been going for a little while, longer than I expected. Yeah, great picks by all, I think.
It makes me really excited to rewatch all of Deep Space Nine. So why don't we start on that soon, Brian?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, let's do it. Yeah, absolutely. I'm all for this. So with the honorable mentions, Stephanie, you had 2. There was Civil Defense and MPOC Nor.
Yes.
Both of which have to do with like kind of this, well, Civil Defense, the station sort of fails. Mm-hmm. We mentioned it earlier. And Dukat and Garrick end up having to sort of save the day in this one. Mm-hmm. What made this episode great for you?
I want to talk about Civil Defense and MPOC Nor in the same in the same thing.
Yeah,
because
kind of a similar.
To me, they sort of go together. They're similar episodes. So background, Deep Space Nine is a former Cardassian base or space station, and its name was Terok Nor in Cardassian, and all of the controls at first were in Cardassian. Like all the computer was built by the Cardassians, and so they built the station. The Federation just kind of took it over to when the occupation was after the war was calmed down, right, between Cardassians and the Bajorans. So the Federation came in and took over this Cardassian station. Well, there's a sister station called Empok Nor, which is a mirror of Deep Space Nine, but that one has been abandoned.
Right.
So in civil defense, somehow a Cardassian alarm something.
They have to reboot the entire, reboot the entire computer aboard Deep Space Nine, and when they do that, it brings up this
trips this Cardassian
programming,
program.
that firmware that's like still a part of the station that nobody knew about, and
it starts locking down the station progressively.
Because it thinks that it's been taken over by an enemy force.
That's right,
which arguably it had.
It had. Yeah, and so nobody knows what to do, and systems are going offline.
Yeah.
Everything is shutting down. They have to rely on analog technologies, and nobody can figure out what the fuck is going on because it's all has been programmed by Cardassians, and they have to rely on Garrick and Gul Dukat to fix it, but Garrick won't talk. Garrick is like, he almost wants them to, he doesn't want to give up the information, or he doesn't know, or maybe both, or something like that. So it's very frustrating as they try to get themselves out of these pickles and finally fix the station. The reason I liked that one was because it really shows how technology and even safeguards built into technology can go amok.
Huge theme in Deep Space Nine is that, and that's its antithesis to the rest of the Star Trek universe, is this technology can really fuck up. And it doesn't always work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but I've certainly tried to take security measures that later were so good that they ended up keeping me out of things.
Oh, it happens to me all the time. I don't want to admit to that, but I'll admit
set
it.
Extra passwords and pins on things, and I don't write them down. And I'm like, oh shit, what is it? I can't get.
It's like, oh shit, that was too good.
Yeah, what the fuck, did I make the password, or did I make a second password on this? It's so good it keeps me out, right? And so I went a little overboard on the balance between security and convenience, and I think that's what happened in that program. And also, it's almost like it makes. I like that show because it almost makes the station itself a character.
Yes.
It's almost like it's an AI or something that they're trying to beat.
Sure.
And it reminds me a lot of Ethereum, they're trying, people are trying to create, nowadays people are trying to create things like this, where it's like a building or a city that's intelligent, and it could go horribly wrong, and you might end up in a situation where you're having to beat it.
The problem of the smart city. Sure.
Yeah, and
Understood.
you don't know what the programming is. And so how do you even beat it? Because you don't know how it's programmed.
Yeah, and Empok Nor is kind of the same thing. And
Empok Nor is kind of the same thing. They have to go to Empok Nor because they need some kind of parts, and they're trying to salvage the parts. And the only place they can get them within miles around is Empok Nor. However, Empok Nor is booby-trapped.
Yeah, with the system that just drives everybody nuts.
Yeah.
On it. Yeah.
And they know it's booby-trapped, so they know it's dangerous to go in there, but they send a team over there anyway to go in and salvage the parts that are needed. It's like they have to get whatever, it's some kind of battery or something like that that the station needs to run. So they have to send people over there. Garrick goes with them because Garrick is like, oh, you're going to need me. I don't know what we're up against, but I can probably have a better sense than most of you humans,
Yeah.
So I think Nog, Garrick, and Jake go over. No, who goes over? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't remember everybody that goes. But anyway, it's the same deal.
Yeah. And it's the same deal. They're trying to outsmart this station, but it's an abandoned station, and it's this weird ghost town, and it's a lot of things are like Terok Nor, Deep Space Nine, but a lot of things are not, and it's different.
Yeah, it was cool alone for there to be another Deep Space Nine. In fact, it's weird because it's spinning on a funny axis because it's just abandoned,
exactly.
And there's a creep factor to that and a cool factor at the same time.
I think the gravity is offline or something. The artificial gravity is off, and so that
yeah, I mean, regardless, like it's pretty wild to really to see that.
It's like a shadow realm of the actual Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, it plays off like that, and the fact that they turned it into kind of a horror story, like really adds into that.
Yeah, it's like a giant haunted house in space.
It's very unique.
And also, I just love those names. Like, it sounds so like they managed to just make up these cultures where like the language of the Cardassians has this sound to it where you hear a word and you're like, oh yeah, that sounds Cardassian.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
right.
Good
like
point.
Garrick, like there's a lot of K's, like words that end in K's, Empok Nor,
right.
Terok Nor. So yeah, I just like that. It had this very ominous feel to it and this very like harsh kind of feel, and it all goes together, and it created a really cool world.
Yeah. Ellen, any thoughts on those? Or
yeah, I mean, what you said is true. They create a culture about all of these different species, and it's very identifiable. So that was cool. I also thought that the idea of like creating a station or any sort of technology that is so complicated that like once it gets beyond a certain complexity, like no one person or even a team of people can really understand how it functions, and that's
it takes a life of its own on
dangerous territory, because it does kind of become its own character.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and Ira Stephen Burr, who's one of the main brainchilds behind DS9, would bring that up, saying, I wanted to create a place where this shit doesn't work, and like where there's problems, and he definitely did that.
And that's real.
Yeah, right.
Experienced it.
We can definitely feel that today.
Yeah.
There were a lot of episodes of Deep Space Nine where it seemed like there was a puzzle that needed to be solved, and I love that feeling. I love that feeling of solving a puzzle. Sure.
And it's not, well, it's easier to build those kind of stories when you're kind of in one place too, which that worked. So, okay, let's move on to the last two honorable mentions. And first one is Way of the Warrior. This is from season 4 opener.
Oh wait, I had one more honorable mention,
okay.
But you can go.
No, go ahead.
We can go around in a circle.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so my other honorable mention was it's called Sons of Moog. It's where Worf's brother is kicked out of the Klingon Empire because Worf disgraced the family by joining Starfleet. And Worf has to go before a tribunal of Klingons to restore his brother's honor. Otherwise, he's going to have to kill his brother, which he doesn't want to have to do.
Right.
So, and then he goes on this whole trial, and he ends up convincing the Klingons that he has not actually disgraced the family, and he clears his name. Or is it Starfleet, or is he accused of like a crime that he didn't commit or something like that? Anyway, he has to restore his family's honor, and he ends up doing it. But I just love Klingons.
That DS9 is definitely your show then.
Yeah.
Because they really, especially after season 4, after Way of the Warrior, they really dig deep into Klingon culture and the Klingons in general. Gowron, General Martok and all of them.
Because this episode, isn't this the episode where Worf finds out that there's actually a lot of corruption happening in the Klingon Empire?
Mm-hmm. He has to expose the corruption in the Klingons to clear his own name, which is interesting. Any government is going to have corruption in it. And then that was my last honorable mention. Quark has an ex-wife who's a Klingon named Grilka.
Yeah.
And there's one episode where Grilka comes on the scene and Worf sees her and he is infatuated with her. And he's, Grilka, she is a goddess. She deserves to be worshipped. And I just love that.
Well, I will say too, like with the episode Sons of Moog, where that might be one of the first ones where you see Jadzia and Worf like training on the Holosuite with Batless. It's pretty hot.
Yeah.
Like
sure.
I thought that was awesome. Like, they're in like these skin tight suits, whatever. And, they're just, that was cool. Like, I really dug that.
Can we talk about Hot for a second? There was an episode where, I don't remember exactly what was happening. Maybe it was like an alternate universe or something, but Kira was working with the Cardassians. She was like some sort of evil, like,
the mirror
matriarch.
Episodes.
Yes, it was the mirror episode where like she was the one who was like whipping people and telling them to get back to
and
work.
She was bisexual. She was openly bisexual in those episodes.
She was very like evil and dominant and
that
powerful.
all leather suit too. And when she was getting out of the hot tub in that, holy shit.
Those were that was a great episode.
I love the mirror universe, and like at some point we can do a whole conversation around that because I am such a fan of the mirror universe and the Terran Empire and everything. And that was an interesting twist because suddenly you find out, oh shit, the humans aren't in charge anymore. And then that this alliance between Bajor, the Klingons and the Cardassians are really running the show. Not Inquisitor. Intendant Kira, I think was her name. Intendant.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. In fact, there's books. There's the Mirror Universe books, and they explore more of that character. And it just gets hotter. And like 7 of 9 comes into it. And,
wow.
Oh my.
Oh my. Yeah. Anyway, great point. There's an honorable mention. Because there's like 5 or 6 episodes that are in the Mirror Universe in Deep Space Nine, and they're all phenomenal. So good call. Okay. Way of the Warrior. Here's the thing. The thing that matters in this episode, Worf becomes a regular cast member on Deep Space Nine. Ellen, what do you think? Like, when Worf came on, how did that impact your viewing of the show?
I just thought it was great to have that tie-in to the Next Generation because there's this character that already has been established, already has all of this history.
Yeah.
But now you get to see him in a totally new context. And I thought that was great. And seeing him evolve over time, especially seeing him fall in love and like get married, that was really sweet. Worf has always been like he's somebody that I would describe as like straight-laced.
Yeah.
Very honorable, sticks to his routine and, always sticking up for what he believes in, and just a very powerful character. But also at times he delivers like these really brief lines that are just like, so funny.
Yeah.
So it was great to see him join in on that series.
Agreed. Yeah. Stephanie, Worf coming on.
I loved it. Yeah, I loved it too.
Yeah. It brought gravitas, it was already an ensemble cast. I don't think he was needed, but he brought so much to the show.
He added to
when
it,
he came on that you were happy about it. And certainly they were going to spend, it seemed pretty clear they're going to spend a lot of time talking about Klingons, and they did do so for the next 4 years or 3 years, 3 or 4 years. And he was a great lens to have to be able to do that, which was, so I thought that was cool. So you got to mention Way of the Warrior, because for a lot of people, I think that's where Deep Space Nine kind of turned for them to where they started really liking it. The last one is Inquisition from season 6. And this is when we get introduced to another interesting aspect of the Star Trek universe, that being Section 31, which Section 31 is a reference to, I think it's Article 8, Section 31 of the United Federation of Planets Charter. And this is like, the Federation's NSA or CIA. And these are guys that are in charge of, no matter what it takes, we'll do whatever is necessary to make sure that the Federation continues as it is. And we will kill and do whatever else. And it comes in the part where, this is playing off of that episode, Our Man Bashir, where Bashir is, playing the spy character. Now he gets to actually be one. Because Section 31 takes an interest in him. They're accusing him of being like actually a spy for the Dominion after he's been kidnapped by the Dominion in previous episodes. But this idea of bringing in a very ugly side of humanity and a very ugly side of the Federation, this was, let me tell you, in the 90s at conventions, people argued about this till 6 a.m. in the morning. And then they'd get up at 7 and they'd start arguing again. Like, this was not okay for a lot of people that, wait a minute, no, the Federation has passed this. They don't do this kind of shit. The ends do not justify the means, which is Section 31 is the means justify or the ends do justify the means. And it was interesting to get that introduced. And then it becomes like a part of almost every series after the fact. You get it in Enterprise. It's all over the place. Suddenly Section 31. Personally, I loved the introduction of it because I don't think that those parts of humanity are ever going to really go away. And it's just something, you kind of have to constantly watch out for. And I did like their leather uniforms.
For a bunch of conspiracy theories.
Yeah. It adds the element of conspiracy to the Federation, which is also very interesting. So, Ellen, did you have any thoughts about Section 31?
I just thought it was scary. And I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of it. But at the same time, you're right. It's not going to disappear from humanity anytime soon. People are always going to find ways to justify protecting the things that they love.
Right.
And for some of the Federation officials, The Federation is what they love more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it really... Yeah, I don't see this kind of element ever going away. And also, I mean, adding in that real sense of espionage and intrigue, I think added a lot of layers to the Star Trek universe in general. I mean, Stephanie, do you have any thoughts about Section 31 in general?
Yeah, I mean, it shows that the Federation is not really all do-gooders necessarily.
Sure.
Like that, it shows that it almost humanizes them a little bit, like that they're not necessarily immune to corruption or imbalances of power. You know, they don't have that. They're going to still want to do dirty work sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, and in Deep Space Nine alone, you figure it out with Cisco. There's episodes where he finds out that he was part of some dirty business, and he says, "No, I'm okay with it."
Yeah.
And so, you know, to allow those parts of humanity and still explore those parts of humanity is a strength, I think, for Star Trek in general, and certainly Deep Space Nine. So, okay, I got one last thing, and this is it, and then we're done. We're done with this episode. Star Trek Online or StarTrek.com did a poll of which ship would you like to serve on.
Oh.
And I'll give you the options, and then you can choose, and then I'll tell you what everybody voted for. So just something fun to end this off with. Of course, the Enterprise D from the Next Generation, Voyager, the original Enterprise from the original series, the Defiant, the NX-01, the Enterprise from the show, Enterprise, or the Discovery, which I don't think anybody's going to pick Discovery, but anyway, all right. So which ship? Stephanie, you're first.
The NX-01.
The NX-01
from the original series.
Wait. From Enterprise, you mean?
Yeah, from Enterprise. Sorry.
Wow,
yeah,
that's all right. Holy crap. Okay,
yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Because
I did not see that coming.
Yeah, because it actually seemed like the closest to the technology that we currently have. It wasn't that far in the future.
Oh, so you feel you'd fit in a little better?
I feel I could fit in. Yeah,
okay.
I feel I could fit in a little better. I feel like they had to solve certain problems, like the communications. They didn't have the universal translators down.
That's the one you'd want to serve on.
Yeah. Wow. And it also seems like, okay, they're not finding any Borg really. Well, except like,
I mean, the universe is a little bit of a nicer place.
It's a little bit of a nicer place. Yeah, it is. They can't really go that far. They're exploring and everything is new, but they're kind of safer.
Okay. That's an interesting pick. Ellen?
Oh man, this was a tough choice, but I mean, my first instinct is to go with Voyager.
Really?
I think that would be so cool to be on a ship that's just suddenly flung across the universe.
All alone.
Yeah, I mean, you're exploring the completely new territory. Like, nothing out there has been seen before or experienced by humans. So, I mean, it's kind of a challenge, too, because you have to learn how to survive in this environment that you've never been exposed to.
Yeah. No, I completely understand, because that's... Ooh.
And imagine the stories you'll have to tell when you get back to Earth.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, right. Boy, similar circumstances, yeah. I mean, what I want to say is, I guess just to differentiate, because that was very similar to what I was going to say. So I'll differentiate a little bit, but I probably would have picked Voyager as well. But I'll say the 1701, the original Enterprise from the original series, because those uniforms. You know what I mean?
For the women?
Those uniforms are great.
The mini skirts?
No. Well, so kind of similar to what Stephanie was. No, it's not just those uniforms, even though I thought those uniforms were amazing. Stephanie happens to have one, actually. Yeah, like in the original series, aboard that ship, the universe, it wasn't as dangerous as like the Borg exist and all this, but like it was a little more Wild West. And I really like that. Kind of similar to the same reason I would choose Voyager. Like it was like the galaxy was a little more Wild West at that time. And yeah, I really, really like that. And you were a little more like, you were kind of we weren't making up the rules as you went along, but you sort of were, because you were exploring so many new worlds. And you didn't have a technological solution for everything. You know, you still had to be a pretty hardy individual. But that speaks to the Voyager thing as well. So, okay, there it is. So that's it. The Star Trek update went like 3 times longer than I expected, but I am so happy about it, because you two are brilliant, and I think it turned out great. So does anybody have anything they want to add about Deep Space Nine?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I we could keep going about this, but
Yeah.
I think we did a pretty good job at covering the best of the best.
Yes, I agree.
When are we watching it?
We got to figure that out
right now.
we got to figure that out. We got to get the DVDs. So, sad thing about Deep Space Nine, they're never going to release them on Blu-ray. It's such a pisser.
Are you sure?
I'm 100%. Well, I'm 99% sure because it costs way too much to do the transfer to high definition.
Oh, that's right.
Voyager also will probably never be on Blu-ray.
Darn.
The Next Generation, they knew enough people would buy the set, so because it literally costs like 25 some odd $1 million just to do the transfers of these episodes. There's other shows that, and I didn't even bring this part up about Deep Space Nine, like Babylon 5 is never going to get put on Blu-ray because same thing. In fact, 25 million might be a low ball. It might be into like $100 million worth to transfer these things to HD and to fix all of these shots. Very expensive proposition, and it probably won't happen because I don't think they think there's as many fans for Deep Space Nine and Voyager as there was the original series or the Next Generation. So, and Enterprise is out on Blu-ray, but that's because Enterprise was filmed in HD in the aughts anyway. So that's not a problem. But yeah, we'll have to get the DVDs. Yeah, I mean, I already have the series like on a hard drive, but
I'm going to add them to my cart right now.
All right, we're going to do it. Awesome. So anyway, okay. Thank you, ladies, so much as always.
Thank you.
This
That
is the
was
most
fun. That was really
that I
fun.
have.
It was.
And we'll be doing these once a month, hopefully. Maybe I don't know if they'll all be this long because we'll be like recording all day long. But but this is great. So all right, everybody. More Patreon content to come out this month. I will see all of you on the other side, and of course, find Ellen and Stephanie on this week's episode of Sovereign Tech. Woo!